We're going to get started. Okay, we got to.
Yeah, we're good.
Is the mic on?
You want it on?
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, you with that kind of power, you wave it?
Can I hold still? Hold still.
Of course, I'm here, brother. I'm here.
I have you sitting, actually, I think we're going to get started. If everyone can sit down, we'll get started.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Jonathan Goldman, and I am chairman of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition, a statewide coalition which represents the voices of the Jewish community throughout the Commonwealth through advocacy, education, and coalition building. I would like to welcome everyone to this year's annual Civic Commemoration of the Holocaust, and thank you, each of you, for being here. Each year, the Governor's Office and the PJC co-sponsor this event. We are pleased that the Commonwealth is continuing this tradition of commemorating the victims, the survivors, and the lessons of the Holocaust. This is important now more than ever. We are likewise grateful for the legislature's unwavering support of this program, their continual support of Holocaust education in Pennsylvania, and their overwhelming support for nonprofit security grants that protect synagogues, mosques, churches throughout our Commonwealth, supporting all Pennsylvanians who wish to worship in peace, free from fear, hate, and violence, especially in these extremely tumultuous times. Part of our collective charge for today is to consider what citizens of the Commonwealth should learn from the atrocities of the Holocaust, and to question whether and how we are sharing these important lessons with the next generations of Pennsylvanians. As we continue to teach our students and our children and ourselves about the horrors of the Holocaust, we recognize that we must educate all society. If we do not share the horrific but vital history of the Holocaust, society may not know when to speak up, when to stand up, and when to fight for tolerance and acceptance of others in our communities who have different cultures or religions or races, or other characteristics. Now more than ever, these lessons are vital right here in the Commonwealth and beyond. In recent years here in Pennsylvania, the implementation of Act 70 of 2014 has assured that Commonwealth students learn about the Holocaust, genocide, and human rights violations in our world history. To date, over 95% of Pennsylvania public, charter, and technical schools take advantage of a comprehensive curriculum and resources to accurately teach their students about what happened in the Holocaust and what we can learn from this history so such a tragedy will never happen again. We thank the legislature for their support with that. History has taught us that good people can become complicit, really, in unspeakable atrocities through their collective silence. To prevent the past from repeating itself, we must speak out. We must reject the wholesale degradation of any group of people by our leaders. If we do not, to paraphrase the words of the German Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller, reprinted in your programs, and you should read them, when they come for you, there will be no one left to speak out. We must understand our world history, remember the atrocities of the past, and be vigilant to make sure they never happen again. In honoring the survivors of the Holocaust, we honor children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of survivors who are with us today, and one survivor who herself is with us today. With great humility and respect, we acknowledge their important contribution to today's program. The events and experiences the survivors endured, their will to recover and continue to live, and the actions of the righteous who helped them to survive and thrive are a living testimonial to the strength, goodness, and faith of the human spirit. Today, I also remember my own grandfather. He was born Avram Dov Safra, a religious Jew in Warsaw in 1920. In 1932, at the age of 11, he emigrated to the United States to escape rising anti-Semitism and Adolf Hitler, ultimately saving my own family from the Holocaust. A dozen years later, he returned to Europe as a private in the US Army, where he too faced anti-Semitism, later legally changing his name that had been changed at Ellis Island from Avram to Abraham. He changed it to Albert because it was less Jewish sounding. My grandfather fought in the Battle of D-Day as an American, and he helped defeat the Nazis and free those remaining in the death camps. As the years continue to bring distance between the atrocities of the Holocaust and the present day, the need to teach our neighbors, communities, and especially our children about the horrific actions of the Nazis only becomes more acute, as does our moral obligation to fight our own prejudices, learn about people different from ourselves, and stand up against hate and to promote tolerance. Without our diligence, the passage of time may begin to cloud our collective understanding, our collective memory of how the Holocaust came to be. We must work against this pool of time so we never forget what happened and do our utmost to ensure it will never happen again. I would now like to introduce Rabbi Carl Chopper of the Jewish Home of Greater Harrisburg, where he has served as a rabbi since 2006. Rabbi Chopper is a graduate of the University of Maryland and the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. It is my honor to call on Rabbi Chopper to offer his perspective.
I feel the need to begin with an expression of gratitude that, by the reports we heard, no one was physically hurt in the sinister attacks that the governor and his family experienced this past Passover after this first Seder. But also an acknowledgement that the felt emotional trauma that must almost certainly follow from such an attack, that is not lost on the rest of us gathered here today. The Haggadah tells us, "Bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu hayav mimitzrayim." In every generation, each person is required to think of ourselves as if we each personally came forth from Egypt. But what the governor experienced is not part of the prescribed order. And he and his family have certainly been our thoughts and prayers. At the Passover Seder, we do read in the Haggadah, in every generation, each person is required to think of ourselves as if we each personally came forth from Egypt. And also, Bechol dor vador omdim aleinu lechol atenu. In every generation, a Pharaoh rises up against us. There is a comment commonly attributed to Mark Twain that history may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. The Passover Haggadah told us long before the time of Mark Twain that history rhymes. It is poignant that we gather here today under these images of William Penn working out for himself how to establish an early experiment in pluralistic democracy, as we recall how hard the Nazis worked to reverse that process. Hitler came to power in 1933 and quickly set out to demolish the constitutionally established democratic system through which he rose to power. Within 2 months, the Nazi regime had already begun establishing camps for the politically and otherwise undesirable, including, among the first, the Oranienburg concentration camp, which my grandfather, in real time from the street in 1933, photographed when he still lived in Berlin. Clearly, its nature and existence even then was widely known. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, by contrast, was established some 250 years earlier as an attempt to create some form of democratic order. Gathering under these depictions of the attempt to create such democratic order while recalling the horrors that accompanied the attempts to destroy such order in the heart of Western civilization is like the Seder greens of renewal dipped into the salt water of tears, or the bitter maror in the sweet charoset at the Seder table. It is poignant because the dance between those paths continues to this day. We need guidance and leadership to navigate the steps of the dance. As we read in Pirkei Avot, in the name of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who used to say, on 3 things, al shlosha devarim ha'olam omed, on 3 things does the world stand, on justice, on truth, and on shalom. We need the guidance of emet, truth, not the technique described by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. If you tell a big lie enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. But truth, honored and respected and upheld. The guidance of deen, justice, which, if it be justice for all, must require the equitable inclusion of everyone in all our nation's glorious diversity. And the guidance of shalom, peace. But the word shalom, being related also to the word shalem, whole, complete, is more akin to the peaceful coexistence of all the parts and parties of our society, through civil discourse and the free exchange of ideas under the protections of the rule of law. In the 1750s, this Commonwealth's civil leaders lifted up one verse of the Torah to be positioned at the top of the colonial state house. Ukratem dror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha. Words that were translated as, proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. These words were cast into the bell which was installed above the State House in Philadelphia and rang over the writing of many of our country's basic founding documents. Here, in this State House, for many years, people have been gathering with the governor in this room at this time of year to encourage the ringing of freedom and to proclaim that never again should Western society or any society be allowed to rhyme with National Socialism. May such gatherings as these continue for years to come as today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Blessed are you, Eternal One, Sovereign of space and time, who releases the oppressed. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Chopra, for those beautiful words and for rooting them so firmly in our traditions and the traditions of our country. We will now hear from Senator Devlin Robinson. Senator Devlin Robinson represents the 37th Senate District in Allegheny County. He was elected in November 2000. Prior to his victory, he served in the United States Marine Corps and founded Veterans Medical Technology. Senator Robinson earned a bachelor's degree from Robert Morris University and an MBA from the University of Pittsburgh. We are proud to have him here. Please welcome Senator Robinson.
Thank you for that very warm introduction. Thank you, Governor Shapiro, and the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition for the opportunity to speak here at this ceremony today. I'm honored to be here with Holocaust survivor Esther Bratt and the families of the Holocaust survivors. The fortitude and resilience of survivors like Esther and those family members being honored today remind us to never forget the atrocities that occurred really not so long ago. Sadly, evil and hate are still prevalent in society today. Unfortunately, we were reminded of that just last week when the governor and his family were targeted in a heinous act of arson at the governor's residence. There is no place for this type of behavior in Pennsylvania or anywhere in the world, and my prayers continue to be with Governor Shapiro and your family. I stand before you today with my colleagues from the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrat, in a spirit of bipartisanship. Each of us represents diverse communities of residents from all different faiths trying to live fulfilling lives and provide for their families, really chasing the American dream that all of us and our families have come to this country for. Pope Francis stated that he wanted his tenure to focus on combating the globalization of indifference. As leaders, we must stand up against all forms of hate and intolerance in our communities. We need to be vigilant when we see political rhetoric getting out of control or violence spurred by prejudice and bigotry. As we learned from the Holocaust, we cannot sit back and be silent in the face of evil. We must act in the present to prevent those future atrocities. I learned this from my great uncle, Major John Robinson, part of Patton's Third Army. He was there for the liberation of Buchenwald. Everything that he had seen from D-Day up until that point, all the images, all the war, the one thing that he always talked about were the images that haunted him from Buchenwald and to his death. He commented that whenever he entered those gates was the day that he knew that the United States was going to win the war. Because he said, if there was a God, there would be no way he would let this continue. And God used him and those men to right those wrongs, to stop those crimes against humanity. And here we are in 2025, and God is using us to call out those atrocities today. We also need to continue to be proactive in preventing those targeted by hate crimes and violence. It was just 7 years ago that 11 of our Jewish neighbors were killed in the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. The legislature, myself included, I pledge we will continue to support funding for nonprofit security grants to protect synagogues, churches, and other places of worship throughout the Commonwealth so all Pennsylvanians can worship freely and peacefully. I greatly appreciate the work of folks like my friends of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh in collecting reports of anti-Semitism and concerning incidents in their efforts to promote understanding in the community. To never forget, we need to continue to educate our youth about the horrors of the Holocaust. These atrocities must be included in our history lessons. And as part of that lesson, we must teach respect, tolerance, and acceptance for all of our students. As Anne Frank so eloquently wrote in her diaries, in the long run, the sharpest weapon of all is a kind and gentle spirit. I truly believe that together we can make a difference. Together we can condemn hatred and violence. Together we can stand up for justice. Together we can promote peace and understanding in our communities. Again, I wish to thank the organizers of this event for allowing me to speak, and I'm honored to have shared in this commemoration with survivors and their family who are here today. And we will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. I like a kind and gentle spirit. My name is Judith Kranis, and I am the chair of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition's Civic Commemoration of the Holocaust. That's a committee. And it's my honor to introduce Senator Judith Schwank, who's from my home area. She currently represents the 11th Senate District in Berks County, and she is the Senate Democratic Caucus Administrator and Democratic Chair of the Senate Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. She is the other co-chair of the newly formed Pennsylvania Jewish Caucus, and she holds a bachelor and master's degree in agricultural education from Penn State University and continued her studies at Harvard University, where she completed the Executive Leadership Program through the Institute for Conservation Leadership and the Institute for Management of Long Life Education. Welcome, Senator Schwank.
Thank you, Judith. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the commemoration of the Holocaust is treated as an important and solemn event, one that annually brings together citizens, religious leaders, and lawmakers in our capital. And today, I'm especially appreciative that a family friend, as well as the Holocaust survivor and her entire family, are here today from my district. Esther Bratt, her family, Leah, her great-granddaughter, and the rest of the Lizowitz family that's out in the audience here today. It's quite an honor to be here with you as well. What we do here today reaffirms a shared commitment to remember the 6 million Jews who perished during the Holocaust and to pledge that such an atrocity will never happen to any people. When I was thinking about what I wanted to say today, I kept coming back to how I first learned about the Holocaust. I grew up in Pittsburgh, in Squirrel Hill, of course, which was even more of a Jewish enclave in my youth than it is today. There were Holocaust survivors in my neighborhood, likely more than I ever realized, but very few people openly discussed it. My mother's cousin and her husband were survivors. They were Hungarian Jews, among the last European Jewish communities to be rounded up and deported to Nazi death camps. Though they survived, they were trapped in communist Hungary and only escaped during the Hungarian uprising of 1956. Eventually, they resettled in Canada. We saw them frequent family reunions and occasions. And their story or their experience was really never shared with us, at least not with the children, which at the time I was. When I was 8 years old, I learned about the Holocaust from an elderly woman who lived on my street in Squirrel Hill. I often spent hours at her home, sipping tea from glasses. She was an old world Russian Jew, and that's the way they consume tea. She told me terrifying stories about what happened to the Jews in Europe during the Holocaust. That's how I learned. Her name was Mrs. Friedlander, and those hours, those afternoons that I spent with her left a lasting impression. Looking back, it's striking to me that the Holocaust was never discussed in my religious school, and certainly not in public school. Thankfully, so much has changed. Our students do learn about the Holocaust, and there are excellent examples of innovative Holocaust education programs, such as the Penn State Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights Education Initiative. This program actually trains educators to help students of all ages understand not only the historical tragedy of the Shoah, but also to reflect more deeply on humanity and human rights. Thanks to my friend and philanthropist, Victor Hamill, and his wife, Dina, who have made the success of this initiative their personal mission, teachers are being empowered to deliver effective instruction on the Holocaust and other difficult subjects. The goal is to help students develop critical thinking, active listening, civil discourse, and empathy. That's the good news. The bad news, and I know you know this and feel it, is that anti-Semitism is rising at an alarming rate. In fact, the Anti-Defamation League just yesterday released its report on anti-Semitic incidents in Pennsylvania. For the third year in a row, we set a record, not a good one, with 465 reported anti-Semitic incidents taking place. This was in 2024. And of course, we've learned and we've talked about the horrific incident that happened to the governor and his family at the governor's mansion. And thanks to the swift action of state police and the Harrisburg Fire Department, we avoided a serious tragedy. No one was harmed. I know we are thankful that Governor Shapiro and his family are safe. And Governor, we continue to think about that in you as well. And First Lady and your children, of course. I'm sure many of us didn't want to rush to conclusions, but it was clear we were looking at a possible hate crime. I know I wasn't alone in thinking it, and there's a reason for that. Those of us who are Jewish are not passive observers of rising anti-Semitism. We live it, we feel it, and it's personal to us. On this day of Holocaust remembrance, Yom HaShoah, we echo the rallying cry, never again. But what does that truly mean? To me, and I believe to all of us, it must mean an unwavering commitment to confront and defeat the hate that led to the Holocaust, the Tree of Life massacre, and the pogrom of October 7th, 2023. Anti-Semitism is a persistent and shape-shifting hatred. It never fully disappears. As a legislator, I believe our government can do more to fight this hatred and prevent its consequences. And I commend my colleagues, State Representative Dan Frankel, who's here with us today, and State Senator Jay Costa, who have introduced legislation to strengthen our hate crime laws. I've recently introduced legislation that would adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism to help law enforcement and local government officials more effectively identify and prosecute anti-Semitic incidents. We honor the memory of the 6 million Jewish women, men, children murdered in the Shoah, and the survivors who persevered and rebuilt their lives in Jewish communities around the world. Their perseverance is what allows all of us to be here today. As the number of Holocaust survivors dwindles with each passing year, it becomes even more urgent to tell their stories, to listen to their stories, to honor their legacies, and protect the progress we have made as a society. Never again is not just a ritual phrase we recite once or twice a year. It is a moral obligation that we must uphold every day. We must do it for those who perished, for those who survived, the children and relatives of survivors, and for the generations still to come. I hope you will join me and continue to work for this as we go forward. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Senator Schwenk, and thank you for sharing with us about Mrs. Friedlander as well. I'd now like to introduce Representative Jordan Harris. Representative Harris currently serves the 186th Legislative District, which includes Philadelphia, and is currently the Democratic Majority Chairman of the House of Representatives Appropriation Committee. He has a bachelor's degree from Millersville University, a master's degree in education from Cabrini College, and is a doctoral candidate in education from Newman University. Chairman Harris is also co-chair of the Black Jewish Caucus.
Good morning. It is an honor to be with you this morning. I'm grateful to be able to speak to you as we commemorate the atrocities of the Holocaust and remember those who were lost and those who survived. When I pondered what I would think about and say this morning, I thought to myself about the relationship that the African American community and the Jewish community have shared over the years. I thought about my friend and my colleague who's here, Representative Solomon, and I, when we started the Black and Jewish Caucus. It was started on the foundation of the irrevocable relationship that the African American and the Jewish communities have had throughout the years in this country. The irrevocable relationship, the marriage of some sorts that can't easily be divorced when you think of the history of both of our communities in this country. You know, it wasn't that long ago that Jews and blacks were otherized in America. Otherized in the sense that we were not true Americans. Otherized in the sense that we did not belong in this country, and otherized in the sense that this was not our home or our land, and that we laid no claim to the title of an American. Together, we were otherized. And so when I think about the Holocaust, and I think about us remembering, not just to think of memories, but remembering for action. Remembering so that we have the vigilance to never allow the hatred that created the Holocaust to happen again. But I also think about why it is important that we never let these things happen again. You know, folks would like to minimize the history of the Holocaust. Folks would like to minimize the history of slavery and of Jim Crow in this country. Oftentimes, they do it by trying to distance themselves and distance our current situations from these memories. Oh, the Holocaust was so long ago, or Jim Crow America was so long ago. Well, we here today are honored to have a Holocaust survivor in our presence, which shows you that it wasn't as long ago as people would try to make us believe. I thought about my grandfather who lives in South Carolina, who next year it will be his 90th birthday. I thought about my grandfather who grew up in segregated South Carolina, who went to segregated schools in South Carolina. Yet someone would try to tell me that that history of America was so far and long ago. It's not. So when we talk about commemorating Holocaust remembrance, it's not just a moment to remember, but it's also a call to action. It is a call for all of us to be vigilant in these days and times about the type of hate and anger and rhetoric that allowed the Holocaust to happen. It is a call to action for all of us that we must raise our collective voices when we see the injustice happening to others, understanding that the injustice can happen to us. I remember texting my friend, the governor, when I woke up and saw what happened at the governor's residence. Not just because he's the governor, not just because he's my friend, but because we can no longer stand on the sideline and allow those kind of acts of hate to happen to any of us. Democrat, Republican, Christian, Jew, Muslim, none of us. Because if any of us are subjected to it, all of us can be subjected. And I'm grateful that the police and fire were able to successfully be there for the governor and his family, and we continue to pray for you and your family. But today, as we commemorate the Holocaust, let us recommit ourselves. We're living in a dangerous time right now, where there are those who would be happy to separate us and pull us apart, where there are those who relish in being divisive and divisive, instead of celebrating those things that hold us together. So I stand here as a black man from South Philadelphia talking about the Holocaust because I remember that when my community, when the freedom rides of the South happened, when Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner were killed, Schwerner and Goodman were Jewish brothers. I remember that we stood shoulder to shoulder in the civil rights movement, fighting together because we collectively knew that what happened to me could happen to you, what could happen to you could happen to me. But now let us move that forward in an America where we understand that we are all in this together. And it can't just be a slogan, but it must be reflected in our words, our actions, our deeds, our legislation, our budget priorities. It must be reflective in everything that we do. That, for me, as a black man from South Philadelphia, is what Holocaust remembrance is also about. Because we collectively remember the lives that were lost, but we also think about what we can do to save the memory. And saving the memory is the action that we take today to make sure that it never happens again to any single community. And sometimes raising our voice isn't easy to do. But I believe that we are all called to do it. We are all called to do it. I'm grateful to be here today with all of you brothers and sisters, all of our God's children, and remembering those lives, the 6 million that were lost. And I personally will never let anybody try to tell me how long ago this was and that we should forget and move on. No, we should never forget, because we should always remember. It is all of our histories collectively to work together to make sure it never happens again. God bless you all.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and especially thank you for reminding us how we are all brothers and sisters. It is now my honor to introduce Representative Jesse Topper. He represents the 78th Legislative District in Bedford County, and he has represented his district since 2014. He's the Republican leader of the House of Representatives, and he holds a bachelor's degrees from Frostburg State University. Welcome, Leader Topper.
Thank you so much. It is indeed an honor to be here, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be asked to be a part of it. I'm also grateful to see so many of our colleagues who are just in attendance. Speaker of the House is here. So honored that you would join us, and many of colleagues across the aisle. My good friend Jared Solomon, who's tired of hearing me say that I don't view certain issues as bipartisan. I view them as nonpartisan. This is not a red or blue Republican Democrat issue. Standing in the gap for our Jewish brothers and sisters is something that is extremely personal to me. As I listen to Mr. Goldman talk about his family, I'm reminded of my maternal grandfather, the Albert family, who came from Eastern Europe during those times to America. I am part of that tradition as we move forward. Governor, I speak for all Pennsylvanians when I say it is good to see you well. I would also be remiss because on the phone this morning, I try and call my parents on my way into the Capitol each morning if I can, and I explained to my mom what I was going to be doing today, and she said, please tell the governor that I inquired about him. Any of you who know my mother know that she is even more conservative than I am on almost every issue. But it is her heritage as well, as it was her family that fled Eastern Europe. And so I have done that. I have passed on her concerns as well. I'll be very brief. As I think of remembrance of anything, but particularly when we talk about remembrance of specific events, I try and reflect internally as what will I remember, what will I think about? And it is certainly easy during this time to look at the history of the world as it relates to the Holocaust and find all of those moments where something could have been done earlier. But quite frankly, there were too many voices who were silent. There was cowardice that was shown. And in some cases, there was simply just pure evil that seemed to prevail. And it's good to learn from those lessons, but today, as I reflect and remember, I choose to look at the lessons that we also learned from those who did not stay silent, from those who showed tremendous courage, both Jews and non-Jews who laid down their lives to ensure that the atrocities would cease. And it is in those lessons that we realize that good will triumph over evil. It can't be a passive thing, but we know that it will happen if we continue to do good, to show courage, and again, stand in the gap for our communities. I will look upon and reflect upon those things today and as we move forward to learn those valuable lessons of courage and of honor, and know that indeed this man, regardless of how long I serve in this institution as a representative, just Jesse Topper moving forward, we'll never forget and will continue to remember and look to the examples of those who did not stay silent, of those who did fight back, and of those who continue to do so today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leader Topper, and agree with you, we cannot afford silence. It is now my privilege and an extreme honor to introduce someone who is very dear to me, and that is Esther Brack. Esther is a survivor who spent, we're going to?
I think we're going to introduce Senator Frankel first.
We're going to introduce Senator Frankel first. I didn't get the message.
Sorry. No,
Sorry.
that,
We'll come back to Esther.
I tricked you by accident. Thank you, Leader Topper. It's now my honor to introduce Representative Dan Frankel, who will then introduce our governor. And I join my well wishes for you and your family to the others. Representative Frankel currently serves the 23rd Legislative District, which includes Allegheny County, and is currently the Democratic chairman of the House Health Committee. He's a former chair of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition and remains an integral partner in advancing our mission as an organization. He's co-chair of the Pennsylvania Jewish Caucus. Representative Franco holds a bachelor's degree from Kenyon College and completed a program for senior executives in state and local government at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Welcome, Representative Franco.
Thank you, Jonathan, and let me thank, this is my 26th year in the legislature, my 26th commemoration ceremony in the governor's reception room, and I want to thank Governor Shapiro for continuing this tradition, and to the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition for working to put this together every year and doing the important advocacy work that is so important to many of us in the legislature on public policies that are important not just to the Jewish community, but to our general community. Earlier this year, we voted on House Resolution 22, which recognizes International Holocaust Remembrance Day and commemorates the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi concentration camp system in occupied Poland. Auschwitz encompassed more than 40 extermination and concentration camps, industrial sites, gas chambers, crematoria, and countless other facilities staffed by thousands of guards. Over 1 million people were murdered there, mostly Jews, but also Jewish Poles, non-Jewish Poles, Romani, Soviet prisoners of war, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. In January of 1942, the Nazis set in motion the final solution, a coordinated industrialized genocide in Europe. Auschwitz was expanded, gas chambers were built, crematoria constructed, and thousands of Jews were transported in railroad boxcars, only to be killed almost immediately upon arrival. I won't recall all the details of the Nazis' cold, calculated planning. That history is well documented in museums, memorials, and testimony across the world. Instead, I want to highlight a lesser-known chapter. As the Nazis realized they were losing the war, they feared the historical record would expose their crimes. In the fall of 1944, the SS began a frantic campaign to destroy the evidence. They burned prisoner records, dismantled gas chambers and crematoria, and shipped stolen materials back to Germany. Although Heinrich Himmler ordered an end to the gassings in November of 1944, executions by shootings continued. As Soviet forces approached, the SS evacuated thousands of prisoners on deadly marches and rail transports in an attempt to leave no witnesses. When the Red Army liberated Auschwitz in January of 1945, just 7,000 prisoners remained. Among those survivors was a teenage girl named Lori Blank, my wife's mother. Her story and the stories of thousands more could not be erased. They could not be silenced. And today, nearly 80 years later, most survivors are no longer with us. It falls to us, all of us, to carry their memory forward. In that spirit, I want to recognize the work of Abe and Janet Bierman, Pennsylvanians who understood the importance of remembrance. In the 1990s, they established a trust to educate students about the Holocaust, a remarkable program that has since taken over 25,000 students from across Pennsylvania to the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, teaching generations about the dangers of hate and the power of bearing witness. The Biermans understood that history does not preserve itself. Once the survivors are gone, it becomes our responsibility to ensure that the lessons of the Holocaust endure. With solemn events like this one, and through vital efforts like the Abe and Janet Bierman Fund, we reject the efforts to distort, to deny, or diminish the truth of the Holocaust. And we guard against the forces of dehumanization and fascism that threaten us this very day. Thank you for being here today to honor the memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, to uplift the voices of survivors, and to recommit ourselves to confronting anti-Semitism in all forms of hate in our time. It is now my honor to introduce a leader who has never shied away from the responsibility of remembrance or from the responsibility of action. Governor Josh Shapiro has always been proud to share his Jewish faith in ways that bring people together as neighbors, as Pennsylvanians, and as fellow human beings. Whether speaking out after acts of hate or working to build a more just and inclusive Commonwealth, he leads with courage, compassion, and conviction. And we are reminded today of just how urgent that leadership is needed. On the first night of Passover, one of the most sacred nights in Jewish tradition, someone set fire to the governor's residence as Governor Shapiro and his family slept inside. It was a chilling act, a stark reminder that violence against vulnerable communities, against those who serve the public, is on the rise. Just yesterday, the Anti-Defamation League released its annual report and confirmed what so many Jews are feeling as they move through their communities, that anti-Semitic incidents continue to climb nationwide, and Pennsylvania it leads the way. In 2024, our Commonwealth was fourth in the nation in anti-Semitic incidents, making it as clear as ever that the persistent problem of acts of hatred against Jews and others will not solve itself. We must all speak with one voice to condemn such acts and take action to ensure our state laws align with the values that we share across faiths: protection of the vulnerable, a commitment to peace, and dignity for all. And please join me in welcoming our Governor, Josh Shapiro.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Let me begin by thanking my good friend of 2 decades, Representative Frankel, for not just the kind words or his steadfast leadership in the House of Representatives, but the way in which he has literally put his community of Squirrel Hill, the site of the deadliest anti-Semitic attack on U.S. soil, on his back, and have lifted them up over the last 5.5 years and taken them from a dark moment to help them see light again. We thank you, Representative Frankel, so very much. It's truly a pleasure to be here with so many members of the General Assembly. I know how busy you are. I know how many demands you have on your time. And the fact that you have come here today to dedicate yourselves to remembering, and I know you carry that work with you every day, I want to say thank you to all who are assembled, and a special thanks to our Speaker, Madam Joanna McClinton, and to our leader, Ruth Topper's son, Leader Topper. I want to thank them both for being here and representing the leadership of all of the different caucuses. I want to thank you, Jonathan, and all of the leaders of our Jewish community who are here today and who dedicate yourselves professionally every day to making sure we never forget. I just want to begin on a personal note to say thank you to the people in this room for your prayers. Lori and I and our children have been comforted by them. We feel your prayers around us, lifting us up. The prayers of our fellow American Jews, the prayers of Muslims and Christians and so many others who may not worship a particular God but have found spirituality and want to share that with us. Your prayers have comforted us and your prayers have strengthened us. For all the leaders who are here in this room, those who have earned the trust of their constituents to represent this great Commonwealth, the person I am most happy to see here today is Esther, my friend. Esther and I got to know each other a few months ago when she joined me at the governor's residence as we remembered the Holocaust and dedicated ourselves to Holocaust education and to making sure we never forget. This hero from Reading, Pennsylvania, has told me her inspiring story of survival, and I have dedicated myself to sharing her story and the story of all survivors. And I know we're joined by children and grandchildren of survivors here. I want to say thank you very much, Esther, for your courage. Thank you very much for making sure that the world knows what you and your family went through, the way you hid, the way you survived, the way your family looked out for you. I was so inspired when I met you and so inspired by our time together. Esther and I sat in my office at the governor's residence a few months ago, and she shared her whole story with us. And I asked her at the end, I said, Esther, are you sure this really happened? She looked at me aghast, thinking, what's the matter with this guy? Why would he ask me that? But the truth is, Esther, there are too many people who don't acknowledge what happened, who don't want to be forced to remember, and who, in their ignorance or their bias, would like to make sure that the world doesn't remember what Esther and others went through when 6 million Jews and millions of others perished in the Holocaust. It is on us to not just be here today, but every single day to ensure that Esther's story is shared, to ensure that our school children know about her, to ensure that the adults in the room who are making decisions put policies and laws and other things in place to ensure that our history is taught and that we never forget, so that never again is not just a slogan recited once a year at an event or a reception, but it becomes a way of life for all of us. I know that Esther's story is incredibly important. I think it's also important we tell the story of heroes like Senator Robinson's ancestors, who made sure that people were liberated and brought to freedom. You know, the day before we celebrated that first Seder at the governor's residence, Lori and I took our kids to Ellis Island. We had never been there before. You know, Lori and I grew up going to school together, and we were in New York for something a while ago and looked at the Statue of Liberty and said, did we go there when we were kids? And she said, no. I said, I think we have a responsibility to take our kids there. We went to the Statue of Liberty, we went to Ellis Island, and we stood with our children on the very spot where our ancestors entered this country, years before the Holocaust, but where they entered this country. This country has always been open to people of all different faiths and all different walks of life, and we've come together in this wonderful melting pot, this wonderful place that's allowed us to have heroes like the senator's ancestors and welcome people yearning to be free, like Esther and others who fled war and fled bigotry in different places around the world. We wanted our kids to see that as part of the work we are doing to teach them. We want every Pennsylvanian to know those stories of liberation. Yes, to know the stories of hatred that we must never forget, but also the stories of heroes and liberation. It's one of the reasons why my wife, Lori, our First Lady, has dedicated herself to working with the Pennsylvania Department of Education to develop a new and updated toolkit for our educators across Pennsylvania to teach about the Holocaust, the heroes, those who perished, those who survived. That toolkit has now been accessed by 1,600 teachers across Pennsylvania in just the last year since we met right here in the governor's reception room. The Pennsylvania Department of Education, at the urging of the First Lady and under the great leadership of Secretary Rowe, has conducted 8 trainings for groups of teachers across Pennsylvania. We must make sure that these stories are told. We must make sure, Mr. Chairman, that the stories of King and Heschel inspire people like you and Jared and others to continue on with this work. Yes, we must remember those who perished, and we must salute the people like Esther who survived, but we also need to learn the lessons that encompass the entire story of the Holocaust, what led to it, what occurred, and how we make sure that never happens again. The responsibility falls not just to those who have positions of elected authority or those who have assumed roles leading organizations within the Jewish community. I believe the responsibility falls to each and every Pennsylvanian to speak and act with moral clarity, to remember the very foundation of this Commonwealth, a foundation depicted in the murals here in this room of William Penn coming to this place, establishing what is now the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with a singular promise and purpose, that what we would know as Pennsylvania would be a place that is warm and welcoming for all people, people of all different faiths. I'm not sure Penn would have ever imagined a Jewish governor talking to all of you here in this room that depicts his picture, but I bet he would be proud, because this is what he set in motion. Every day, I get to see our common humanity, and it lifts me up. People of all different walks of life, all different faiths, all different upbringings, different terrain from the community they live in, who understand, I think, deep in their soul that we're part of something special here in Pennsylvania that Penn set in motion, and that we have a responsibility to continue that with our votes, with our actions, to continue that by speaking and acting with moral clarity every day. That shared humanity is something that should inspire all of us. Yes, Representative Frankel, Senator Schwank, and others who have cited the statistics about rising anti-Semitism, they are right. It is rising, and it must be universally condemned. But let us not only look at the negative, let us also see the positive that exists out there, the shared humanity we all have, the way in which people acknowledge a love for one another, even though we come from different places, different walks of life, came to this country differently. I'll close with this. Lori and I and the kids wanted the opportunity last week to say thank you to the firefighters and the first responders who saved our lives at the governor's residence last Sunday morning. The kids thought it would be nice to make these firefighters a meal. Recognizing I can't cook, I thought it was important that we get a little bit of help. And with the help of Chef Robert Irvine, my family and I had the opportunity to serve these firefighters, these heroes, a meal at the Harrisburg Firehouse. Firefighters from all across this region answered the call, and that day we had the opportunity to visit with each of them one-on-one and just say thank you. The chaplain from the North Penn Fire Department here in central Pennsylvania came over to me with a letter signed by each volunteer firefighter in their small department. It was a typewritten letter. It was a beautiful message. Each of the firefighters signed it. On the back, this 90-year-old or so Christian chaplain hand wrote a prayer to me and to my family, a prayer of comfort, a prayer to make sure we are watched over by God, a prayer known to me as the priestly blessing, and a prayer that I recite nightly over each of our 4 children and have since the day they were born. We don't worship the same way. We come from different generations. We were raised in different parts of this Commonwealth. We have different jobs, different ways of thinking about different things. But yet, we were bound by a singular chapter in the book of Numbers that we each draw strength from for different reasons and use it for different purposes, but another example of our shared humanity. So as we dedicate ourselves to never again, to always remember, to never forget, Yes, let us dedicate ourselves to removing hatred and bigotry from our society. Let's do that work together. Let's also not lose sight of the goodness of this great Commonwealth, how it all started, the point of this place, and the way ordinary Pennsylvanians every single day show up to be there for one another. They're the best of us. We need to take our cues from them. We need to learn from them. I'm honored to be here again after many years of attending this event. It takes on particular meaning, I know, right now. As people like Esther are fewer and fewer in our society, we must make sure to embrace them, to salute them, to thank them for being here and for their courage. And we must make sure we embrace one another each and every day to find our better angels and to make sure never again becomes a promise and a purpose of our great Commonwealth. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you, Governor. We all have a shared humanity, and I think the Governor is absolutely right. We need to find it in every moment of our lives. I'll continue then with introducing dear Esther Bratt. She was one of the first people to greet me when I moved to this area, and she extends such a warm welcome. You are immediately drawn into her circle. She is an absolutely lovely person who is always other-centered and always kind and always generous. She is this way, although her history was not so kind to her. She spent 2 years in the ghettos during the war before being moved to a labor camp, but she was able to escape from the camp, and she survived. And she survived to share blessings with all of us. And we all love her dearly. There is not a person who knows her who doesn't love her. I say that. And Esther, I think you have a few words for us.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you so much for remembering. It is so important. Thanks again.
Thank you, Esther. We are so delighted you could be with us today. And we're going to hear from her great-granddaughter in just a little bit. But we are ready to light our 6 candles in memory of the Holocaust victims. There were 6 million who were Jews. There were another 5 million who were not Jewish, and we remember them as well. And it is now the responsibility, as I think several of our speakers mentioned, that their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren will be sharing their stories and educating future generations. But to see Esther here today is a testament to your courage and your hope. Thank you. So before we begin our actual commemoration, I would like to observe a moment of silence for survivors who are no longer with us but have been in this room to light candles, and to Michael Sand, who was the chair of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition and chair of this program for many, many, many years. His dedication and drive to assure that the Holocaust is always remembered was second to none. The other names that I would mention of people who used to be with us in this room are Sonia Glick, Frida Lederer, Sam Rosen, Sandy Sternberg, Sam Sharon, and Bluma Shapiro. And let's just have a moment of silence. Thank you. Now, we have some guests here who are going to be lighting the candles, and we are so grateful to your being here. I'm going to ask that when your name is called, you please rise, and come over here to light a candle in memory of your family and the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust. And once you've lit your candle, please, you can return to your chair. We ask you to remain standing if you are comfortable to do so. And the first person we'll call up is Jason Holtzman, in memory of Herman and Sally Holtzman of Philadelphia. Thank you. Jack Kay, in memory of Emma Kay of Philadelphia. Thank you. Lillian Rappaport, in memory of Jacob and Genia Weinstock of Harrisburg. Ray Rose, Jesse Rosen Harvey, and Lisa Rosen Krupp, in memory of Sam and Olga Sunyog Rosen of Scranton. Thank you. The Honorable Mike Schlossberg, in memory of Harry and Helen Hertzberg of Brooklyn, New York. Scott Shapiro, in memory of Blumen Shapiro of York. And we're going to relight them, okay, because we have Rachel Smithers and her son Ben Smithers, in memory of her grandparents, Irene and Martin Schwartz of Wheaton, Maryland. Thank you. Pennsylvania Budget Secretary Uri Monson, in memory of his wife's grandparents, Kalman and Hilmbold Zweibel of Denver, Colorado. Thank you. Karen Sanchez, Controller of Montgomery County, and wife to State Representative Ben Sanchez, in memory of her grandparents, Elsa Weithheim Hilbron and Hugo Hilbron, and her Aunt Ruth Hilbron Gottlieb. Esther Bratt and her family. Thank you all. Please be seated. And on behalf of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition, we would also like to issue a general honor to a special group who have not often been honored in their home communities, and that is the children, great-grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of all the Holocaust survivors, who will be continuing to tell the story of the Holocaust when their survivors are no longer with us. And we thank you all, and we honor all, and know that we will always remember.
Thank you, Judith. Before I introduce the next speaker, I would like to recognize the staff and board members of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition, including Judith Kranus and Hank Butler, who have worked so tirelessly to put this program together. I'd also like to recognize the public officials who have joined us today for the ceremony. These include Eric Failing, Catholic Conference, Representative Mibu McKenzie, Representative Johnny Cepeda Freitas, Representative Ben Sanchez, Representative Jill Cooper, Secretary Nancy Walker, Secretary Uri Munson, Representative Jamie Flick, Representative Jared Solomon, Representative Mary Isaacson, Representative Brett Miller, Speaker Joanna McClinton, Representative Tim Briggs, Representative Tarek Khan, Representative Joe Hohenstein, Representative Ben Waxman, Representative Justin Fleming, Representative Valerie Gatos, Representative Abigail Salisbury, Representative Kathy Rapp, Representative Kristen Marcel, Representative Robert Freeman, Representative Mark Gillen, in addition to those up here and anyone else who I may have missed. I'd now like to introduce Leah Lisowitz, a student at Wyoming Junior High School in Reading, and the great-granddaughter of our speaker today, Esther Bratt. Please welcome Leah Lisowitz.
Good morning, distinguished guests, and everyone gathered here today. My name is Leah Lisowitz, and I'm a 7th grader at Wyoming Junior High School, located just outside of Reading. It is an honor to stand before you to share two stories that are very close to my heart. Two stories that reflect the resilience, strength, and survival of my great-grandparents, Esther and Sydney Bratt, who I've always proudly and lovingly referred to as my Gigi and Pop-Up Sid. My great-grandparents' experiences during the Holocaust remind us of the horrors of that time and the importance of preserving their stories, as well as the Holocaust stories of others, for future generations, with the hope that history does not repeat itself. I'm beyond fortunate that I've always lived within a mile of my Gigi and Pop-Up Sid. Since I was little, Gigi and Pop-Up Sid have shared their Holocaust experiences with me. The older I've gotten, the more detail they have provided. Gigi and Pop-Up Sid's stories have impacted our family and shaped us into the people we are today. Sadly, Pop-Up Sid passed away in September of 2024. While Pop-Up Sid is no longer with us, we are blessed beyond measure that Gigi is still going strong and she is with us here today. I will now share a brief overview of Gigi's Holocaust experience. My great-grandmother Gigi was born in Vilna, Poland, and was about my age when World War II began. Gigi was in the Vilna ghetto from 1941 to 1943. Based on her circumstances, Gigi had a 1.5% chance of surviving the Vilna ghetto during the Holocaust. To survive with her parents, Gigi had a less than 1% chance. This means that if there were 100 families living in Vilna, Poland before the Holocaust, only one intact family was alive after the Holocaust. Gigi's family was that one. The fact that I'm speaking to you today is nothing short of a miracle. The Holocaust was a time of unimaginable suffering, as Nazi Germany and its collaborators intentionally murdered 6 million Jews, simply because they were Jewish. After the Nazis invaded Vilna, Poland in 1941, Gigi and her parents were forced into the Vilna ghetto. She spent the next 2 years living in daily fear, and in 1943, after many brushes with death, Gigi and her parents were transported from the Vilna ghetto to Holocaust labor camp. In March of 1944, the Nazis initiated a campaign called Kinder Action, an attempt to exterminate the children of Holocaust. On one fateful day, trucks arrived, and Nazi soldiers with guns roamed the streets, looking to murder the next generation of Jews. Gigi's father, who had been working outside the camp, managed to save Gigi by convincing the Nazi soldiers that she was a worker and not a child. This, along with her height, saved her life. The brutality was incomprehensible. To think of the innocent lives lost, the children taken, and the families destroyed is heartbreaking. But what's equally as moving is the courage and hope that endured amidst all the suffering. Gigi remembers that just before Kinder Action, the children of HKP Labor Camp put on a Purim play, a beautiful act of defiance in a time of such darkness. Because Gigi's father worked outside the labor camp, he had some contact with non-Jewish people. He worked with a Christian man named Nikolai. Nikolai liked Gigi's father and told him if he could ever be of help, that he would. Gigi and her family escaped the labor camp to Nikolai's house during a time of extreme turmoil and lived in a small cellar where Gigi was hidden for 2 weeks before being liberated in July of 1944. Many Jews, like Gigi's family, survived because of the kindness of Christians and other non-Jews. One important lesson to take from today is that every person can make a choice to help someone else, to be a good person. The Jewish people are so grateful for people like Nikolai that Yad Vashem, the Israeli Holocaust Museum, dedicated a section to honor non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews. Now, I will share a brief overview of Pop-Up Sid's Holocaust experience. Pop-Up Sid was born in Gustav, Germany in 1928. He was the oldest of 4 children. He had twin brothers, Heinz and Irvin, and a little sister named Irma. After experiencing Kristallnacht, the night of shattered glass, firsthand, Pop-Up Sid's mother was able to get immigration papers and exit visas to send only one of her children on kinder transport. The kinder transport was a rescue effort that brought nearly 10,000 Jewish children from Nazi-controlled territories to Great Britain between 1938 and 1940. At the age of 10, Pop-Up Sid boarded the SS Washington to England. Pop-Up Sid would never again see his mother or siblings. He couldn't speak the language and he didn't know anyone. He lived in various Jewish orphanages throughout the war. And in 1945, at the age of 17, Pop-Up Sid was reunited with his father in London. Pop-Up Sid never learned what had happened to his mother or siblings. Today, I'm sharing my great-grandparents' stories as part of my Bat Mitzvah project. This is similar to a community service project. My Mitzvah project is spreading awareness about the Holocaust to make sure that history does not repeat itself. Over the past 18 months, I have visited schools, colleges, and libraries to speak about the Holocaust. Not just to recite the facts, but as a reminder that we must never forget the lessons the Holocaust teaches us about human dignity, the importance of standing up against hatred, and the resilience of the human spirit. Gigi and Pop-Up Sid have always been role models. In their actions, their kindness, their courage, their generosity, and their optimism has been unmatched. There is no way around it. Hatred can be scary. Hatred often takes root when we let fear take over. Fear can cause us to behave irrationally, and fear of another group of people can cause us to treat people without the basic human dignity we all deserve. May we all work together to share stories like Gigi's and Pop-Up Sid's, to remember lives lost, and to treat others with kindness and respect so that nothing like the Holocaust will ever happen again. My Gigi and Pop-Up Sid's Holocaust survival is an example of the strength of the Jewish people and the memory of those who perished. As we gather here today, let us all commit to keeping their stories alive, to teaching future generations the importance of remembrance, and to standing up against hatred, bigotry, and intolerance in all its form. Thank you.
That was incredibly beautiful. Your grace, your composure, and your sharing of your grandparents' story. It's the very embodiment of what we are trying to do today for all of us. And Esther, or if I may refer to you as Gigi for a moment, you and Pop-Up Sid did an amazing, amazing job. And you're going to ace your bat mitzvah. As we come to the end of our program, I wish to thank all of our speakers, the press in the room, and everyone in the audience for supporting this important program and for carrying it forward with you. Now we will conclude this program with a violin performance of the song Zog nit kein Mol, or Never Say. The lyrics, which are reproduced in your programs, were written in 1943 by Hirsch Glick, a young Jewish inmate of the Vilna Ghetto. And this Yiddish song is considered one of the chief anthems of Holocaust survivors, like Esther. Today, the violin will be played by Ben Smithers, a student in the Susquehanna Township School District and the great-grandson of survivors of the Holocaust. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Thank you to the governor and for everyone who spoke, and to everyone for coming today. Now more than ever, please remember to speak up, to speak out, and to help teach and share the principles we have learned today. Never forget, and never again.